like to blink. Our attention span is 20 seconds and we're gone. We're on to the next thing. If I didn't want to just drop off of the resurrection, to me, I think it's just, I like to linger over it. I like to savor it. There used to be a little show that we used to like to watch with the kids called Ratatouille. You ever hear of it? Ratatouille, yeah. He was a gourmet cooking mouse. He just liked to cook up stuff. And he had a relative, one of his little cousins or whatever it is, how rats are or stuff, and mice, they have a million of them, right? A million of relatives. Well, one of them just liked to hork it down, he said. I don't want to hork down the resurrection. I want to savor it. I'm kind of on the line of Ratatouille this morning. I just, I want to savor the resurrection. So we're looking, again, at the resurrection this week. A little bit of a different aspect, just kind of like looking at what it means to really believe in the resurrection, what it means to our faith. And so we're answering the skeptic this morning from John chapter 20. I'm starting at verse 24. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. And although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." And Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." A skeptic, some call him a doubter. He didn't believe what the disciples had said. I want to give him a little slack, and I always do, because I see him, he's like a guy that's just dealing with some real situational things. And, if we went through what he went through, I don't know as we'd be any different than Thomas. Right, Tom? Gotta give Tom's a break. So we're going to give Tom a break today. And we're going to give him a little slack. We're going to say, okay, we're going to give him room to grow. Give him a little place to, kind of savor the resurrection. Kind of look at it a little bit. Give him some time. Just everything that happened. Now, we went through it in a week. And that's what he did. But if you had a week like Thomas had, you might be asking some questions. If you had a week like Thomas had, man, I mean Jesus, the one that he loved, the one that he said, he had committed himself. Thomas was the one that said, let's go with him, we'll die with him. If that's what it takes, we'll just die with him. Thomas was willing to lay down his life for Jesus. Well, that wasn't in the cards, so to speak, for Thomas. Thomas, pretty skeptical here. All the disciples on the night of the resurrection were all gathered together, all on the very night. That, Mary was there in the morning, but the disciples were there at night. And Jesus came, he appeared, the room was locked. They were fearful because of the Jews and afraid of what it meant to be identified with Jesus, his disciples, his followers, his main 12, those who were like his groupies, all right? His people. And so everybody, they knew who he was, right? They knew these followers. And so they were all there, and then Jesus appears, shows them his hands, side. And Thomas wasn't there. Poor Thomas. A lot of people speculate, well, why wasn't Thomas there when the other 10 were there? Judas had already, gone and hanged himself. So there's 10 left. Thomas wasn't there. A lot of people speculate, well, maybe he just was too overwhelmed with grief. Maybe he was just, not that responsible or whatever. I don't know. You can throw all kinds of guesswork into the mix. But he just wasn't there. I don't think it's really a good idea to read things into Scripture. I like to take things out of Scripture, because that's where it's all at. When you read things into Scripture, you tend to fudge it a little bit. Tend to come up with stuff that's really not Scripture. So I don't want to second guess why he wasn't there. It just tells us he wasn't. Okay, Thomas. So all the other disciples, they tell him, we've seen the Lord. Thomas, that's kind of hard for Thomas to believe. He's skeptical. We have seen the Lord. 10 guys. He knew him for years. He's been traveling with him. Did he have a reason to think that perhaps they would lie to him? That'd be an awful thing to lie about. That'd be an awful thing to lie about, wouldn't it? Can you imagine someone you love and someone coming up to you and telling you a lie, like they died? That'd be awful. But then if they died, to say something like, no, they didn't, that'd be awful too. Either way you go, it's kind of an awful thing. But why did he suspect? Well, when you see the gruesome reality of crucifixion, that cross that we've made into jewelry, that cross that we've made into, just a trinket, a representative, an icon, if you will, pretty silver cross, wear it around your neck. It was an instrument of torture. And it was gruesome, and it was a terrible thing. And I don't know how Thomas, would approach all of this, but something in him just made him push off all their testimony. He rejected it. All of them. 10 people, at least. The idea, could be there was a lot more than that there. Now, at least his 10 disciples, that other than Thomas, that were left, were there. But there might have been more. But the testimony comes to him. We have seen the Lord. And his response to it is total rejection. If someone told you that they were at a funeral, and they said, well, he just got out of the coffin and walked away, what would you say? I'm just trying to give him a little room here, I don't care if 10 or 12 people came to you, you probably would say, wait a minute. Where's he at? You'd be looking too. You'd say, show me. So all of a sudden everybody's from Missouri, right? Show me the state. Because it just doesn't happen. So I'm trying to give Thomas some slack here. This is a claim that is just too bizarre. This is a big thing. And we don't want to take it lightly. They said, yeah, they're excited. I can't imagine how they would have told him. I can't imagine the excitement, what kind of an attitude. We read it on the page. It doesn't carry on the page. It doesn't carry all the emotion, the smells, the bulging eyes, the excited voices. All those things don't carry over to us from the page. But still, Thomas says, I got to see it, for I believe it. I've got to touch it. And so he says, no way am I going to believe this until I get verifiable proof. I've got to touch, I've got to see, it's got to be tangible. It's got to be something that comes to me like See it for himself. In fact, he is so determined that he will not believe them that he doubles down on this. In the Greek, there's two words, and it translates into the ESV, it translates, I will never believe. Now, in English, we have two negatives, it makes it positive. If you say, I will not believe, that means you will believe, right? But in the Greek, they use a negative twice for emphasis, and he uses two different negatives just to make it like, ooh, you know? And that's the way it's just, they're trying to translate it, I will never believe. I will absolutely, it's just like, there's no way. This is utter rejection. He said, no way, he doubles down on it and just like, absolutely, like grit your teeth, not believe. And before you say, well, that's pretty bad, give Thomas a break. There are a lot of people that do that today. They determine not to believe in their heart. I ain't going to believe that stuff. There ain't no way. Give Thomas a break, people. He's requiring something. I want to be able to see it. I want to be able to touch it. Put it in a test tube. Repeat it time after time again. I want to be able to verify it. And so this idea that somehow if I see it, if I touch it, that's more valid than someone else telling me about it. Because it's personally apprehended. I can get it myself. And again, before you pounce on Thomas, every single one of you personally had to apprehend Jesus yourself. If you didn't, then you haven't. It's as simple as that. We all need individual attention. And we all need to apprehend it. Now, granted, he is specifying some pretty particular ways that he must receive Jesus. And maybe that's where Thomas falls a little short. Gotta see it to believe it. No other thing will do. He didn't see air, but he's still breathing air, right? So he doesn't have to see that. So this limits his reality. It limits what you can take in. And so for Thomas, he approaches this idea of faith with a very limited reality. Scientists do it all the time. You got to be able to reproduce it in a test tube. You got to verify it again, and do it again, and then we can believe it and mark it down on paper and put it in a textbook somewhere. It's okay. Scientists do it all the time. That's what scientific faith is. They live in a closed system. It's a limited reality. Jesus is about to blow Thomas's system out of the water. Because Thomas is going to be able to see more than he can see with his eyes. Jesus, 8 days later, what day would that be? The Jewish way of counting, inclusive of the day to the next day, 8 days would have been Sunday. The Lord's Day. We gather on Sunday. This is where people started worshiping because the day of the resurrection became the Lord's Day. People realize that there's a new era. There's something going on here. And so 8 days later, just to put a emphasis on this day, Jesus shows up. He didn't show up on Saturday, on the Sabbath, which would have been reasonable if you were Jewish, right? And he didn't show up on Friday. No, he waited until the day of the resurrection. Just to show what it is. And he said, guess what? I'm here! And Thomas was there. Now Thomas, we've been giving Thomas some room, right? He wanted, in his limited reality, in his closed space, in his little, put God in a box. Jesus said, okay, I'm coming in a box. You want to put God in a box? I'm coming in a box. And Thomas, you better be ready. And Thomas wasn't ready. What hit Thomas' senses was more than he could He could it's almost like you see him just reading on the page. I mean, you can't, like I said, you can't feel off from the page, but it almost leaps from the page that there is something really intense that happens here. He sees Jesus. And Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here." He says to Thomas, "Put out your hand, put it in my side." Wow. Thomas. His whole reality changed. It wasn't because Jesus came physically to him. It wasn't because Jesus could be touched. He didn't even touch him. It wasn't because Jesus could be seen. He could see him. What happened? Yes, Jesus came into his limited reality. Jesus came in and said, "I'm here," and he answered everything Thomas asked. Unless I see for myself and touch it myself, I'm not going to believe. He did all of that, but there's more here for Thomas. Thomas didn't need to touch Jesus. Thomas didn't even need to see at this point, though the seeing is what opened the doors to his real sight. Because there was something beyond that. The doors were locked. And Jesus came amongst them. That don't happen. That's outside of his box. Right? That's the kind of things that don't happen inside the box we put Jesus in. You know? The skeptic goes, "What?" It doesn't fit. See, there's supernatural signs. And when he says, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side," that tells Thomas that he was there when he said, "That's what I require to believe." He was there a week before. He was there the whole time. And he heard what Thomas said. How could that happen? That's outside the box. My limited reality. Gotta see. That's beyond sight. I didn't see him there when I said that. How did he know what I said? And how did he get through that door? And above all, how? With those hands still bearing the marks, with his side bearing the marks of the spear, death. But he's alive. That's the biggest one. How do you answer the skeptic? Got to get outside the box. And Thomas' box was blown wide open. It's like, there ain't no more box, Thomas. How do you get outside that box? How did Jesus get outside the tomb? I mean, he didn't have to push the door open. He came into a locked room. He didn't get out of a locked tomb. They opened it so people could see in. He was gone. See, there's some things that just blow out our box. And so Thomas confesses the truth that transforms him. And he says, "My Lord and my God." In that one confession, Thomas says, "Faith is mine. I believe." That was his belief. Do you know the book of John, in the very beginning? John started out with that. Here we are at the end of the gospel. All these things have come. He started out in the very beginning, in the first chapter, the very first verse. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. And finally, at the end of the book, we have the confession. My Lord and my God. Thomas comes to believe. The confession. that transforms his whole being. And Jesus says, you believe because you see. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Thomas says, Lord, you are my Lord and my God. You know, when we talk about my stuff, you know, we think of my. If I would like say, well, my, you know, this is my suit or my tie. This is straight. Jeanette's real fussy about that my tie straight. She tells me to straighten it, it's not. But we talk about my this or my that, right? And it belongs to me. But this is turned on its head. When he said, my Lord and my God, that isn't Thomas possessing God. That is God possessing Thomas.
That's right.
That is just, his whole life is turned on its end. It's surrendered to him. It's surrendered to God. It's like Thomas is blowing out all the stops. He said, you blew out my box. I'm yours. His faith is full. His faith is vibrant. His faith is no less than what the ones that Jesus says are blessed if they confess who he is without sin. There's no like hierarchy of faith here, like somebody's faith is better than others. We all need something to believe. Faith is always pinned on something. Every one of us. You know, there's something that we pin on. If you are just like, if your faith is like blind, then I don't think it's real faith. It's not scriptural faith. See, because even John says, I've written this and this and this, and I've given you this testimony. You base it on the testimony. You base it on something. Your faith is based on something. If you're just believing to believe, then you're just believing your own faith. It's just like blank stuff. It really doesn't mean anything. It's based on who Jesus is and proves himself and who he shows himself to be. So we look at the signs and the wonders, and we look at all this stuff. And John presents to us, perhaps for our own good, the greatest skeptic of all. You know, I mean, Thomas, right? Everybody calls him the doubter, right? We are picking on him. But he needs something to pin his faith on. And all those guys, yeah, you know, got my box. I got my Jesus in my box. I got my Jesus in my tomb. I got my Jesus in my square. And I won't let him out. And Jesus says, I'm coming out. And we all need to see that. And if we pin our hopes, our belief, all of our faith on what Thomas says. Thomas is a skeptic. If there's anyone who would just refuse to believe, it's Thomas. But yet even he believes now. And so we have all the other 10 disciples. Oh, we couldn't believe him. But if anybody, we can believe it's Thomas. Because now Thomas is changed. And he was the most resistant of all the disciples. And even he believes. And John, when he records Thomas, you think, oh, he's not doing any favors to Thomas. He's being honest. He's just being honest. What's it take from... I was a skeptic. I mean, it took a lot for me to believe. I had to get down the bottom of the barrel. The only place I could look was up. I mean, all different kinds of ways that God blew my box apart. He had delivered me from alcohol, and that was the only way that I could. That don't happen. That blew my box apart, because everything in my experience said, I'm a captive. I'm a slave. I can't win. And then when he blew my box apart, it's like, oh, Jesus, my Lord and my God. And he'll blow your box apart too if you give him a chance. That's where we believe. We have to look at this testimony. Are we willing to have our box blown apart? Are we willing to open up ourselves? Are we, even if it takes whatever? If you're still in your box, will you even let Jesus in your box? Or are you so adamant in not believing that no matter what he does, you won't believe? Do you leave room for him to come in the box? Is it locked? He can come in anyway. See, the skeptic has hope because of Jesus. Jesus can come in your box. Just give him just a chance. He'll come in your pockets. There was a fellow by the name of Lee Strobel. I don't know if you ever heard of him or not. Lee Strobel had a box. He thought he had Jesus all figured out. And his trade or his job was he was a journalist. And his job was to disprove myths. His job was to verify facts. You know, he was a journalist. And he set out to disprove the resurrection. He set out to say, this Jesus stuff, once and for all, I'm going to put an end to this. And so he's like pulling all the facts and trying to look at it all, you know, and you know what? Jesus came into his box. He got to the point where it was the tomb. He was investigating all the witnesses, extra-biblical, biblical, all the witnesses he could find, you know, different ways, the manuscripts, this and that. And he was looking at all this stuff, and he just come to the point where he just couldn't figure out who moved that stinking stone. You know, how did that stone move? He wrote a book called The Case for Christ, and if you ever get a chance, I recommend it to you. It's a wonderful testimony of his transformation, his Thomas moment. He was a skeptic. And if you give him half a chance, Jesus will come in your box and you'll believe, just like Thomas, just like Lee Strobel, just like Ken Morris, just like, and you put the name there. And I don't know how many skeptics. I think we're all kind of skeptics at heart a little bit. A lot of us don't want to be fooled. We don't want to just believe for belief's sake. Don't want to be gullible. Jesus comes in, just give him an inch. Unless I touch, unless I see, and Jesus says, touch and see. Mm-hmm. Jesus met him where he's at. We have to look at the testimony of Thomas. Look at the testimony. And he says, now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And this is the purpose that John wrote the gospel. And as he writes this gospel, this book of testimony, from chapter 1, where he first starts out, Jesus is God. And he takes us through all of his arguments, all of the testimony, all of the signs and wonders. Chapter 2, first sign, Cana. All the way through, you go through the feedings and, raising Lazarus, all the way through. And at the end of the road, there's Thomas, from beginning to end. And then he says at the end of the book, he says here, almost, second to last chapter, he's telling us, I wrote all this so that you would have a testimony, something to pin your faith on, so that you could see Jesus is the Son of God, that he is the Christ, that he is the Messiah. It took us all the way to the other side of the tomb. We didn't believe when he changed water into wine. Keep on going. Thomas, keep on going down that road. We didn't believe when he took a couple of fish and some bread and fed 5,000 people. Well, Thomas, you don't believe that? Keep on going. Keep on going. All the way to the end of the book. Till you can say, along with Thomas, my Lord and my God. Till you can come to that place where faith transforms you and you don't have God in a box, but he has you boxed in. And he says, I own you. And he says, I am your master. And you say, my Lord and my God. Till you confess him as your Lord. That's where we have to come to. It isn't just the resurrection is a neat thing. It isn't about that. It isn't just because he can and say, oh, cool, look, he can rise from the dead. It's more than that. It's that he is Lord and God of the universe. The very one that made you, that made all there is. The one that created all that you see. Nothing was made without him. Ireland. Spring. Baby Letty. Everything. And if you believe that, you may have life in His name. So hopefully if you're a skeptic today, I've answered some of your concerns. I pray that if you're still skeptical, that God will blow your box apart. Knock the sides out. If you just want God to blow your box apart, He will. If you're certain that He cannot, well, you've already cut Him off. You can't believe because you've already. We're going to sing hymn number 491. And hopefully this speaks to you this morning. That you'd be able to look at Jesus in a different light. If you've been skeptical about Him. Turn your eyes on Him. Maybe you'll be able to see a little bit of who He is if you're willing to have your box going apart. Pray with me. Lord, you said that those who have not seen and yet have believed are truly blessed. In that beatitude, we would ask, that benediction we would ask on those here today, those not seeing, yet believing, filled with joy, inexpressible. Lord, that we would give testimony to your grace and goodness. That we would say, my Lord and my God, and carry you to a world that is done. That we would help them to turn their face and see you beyond this world into eternity. Help us be your church. May we convert skeptics, I pray. In Christ's name, amen.
They're just going to go down on their own. I'm not sure about Sanders. Sandy, Sue, are you going to retreat? Yeah, you're just going to go down on your own. Like then you and Marcia. Are you going to room with us if we have space? Everybody go in your room together? Who else is flexible? Mindy, Kelly, and
that's good. That's good.
And they've always been back something. And you saw right there.
so in my car it's just us. Where are you going? Saturday only?
I'm concerned. Are you paying for Saturday? And you can go because there are the free meals, and I thought the price was really for Saturday. Okay, good. Now look, I'll show you how to do my Bible app. And I would assume like $3.
Usually it's about it. Oh, good. So it's just you and I. two kids. Jean and Martha, and now are going down on their own.
Because,
They might hook up with you for the other guy.
yeah, run the butler, be back.
Yeah, you got snacks, I got drinks. I'll bring my drink for you.
Not at all, because I'll drop it off on my way.
Yeah, and I'll bring it Thursday night and stuff. For kids clubs.
Yeah, so I'll be there.
And maybe Lex could lead some songs. Yeah. But you can pop that CD on, and have me, and you know what CD. But Lex could lead it. Okay.
If you guys want Thank you. I'll look into it for sure. Good morning, boys. Good morning. Good morning.
Well, it's my daughter's baby. She's trying to I told them that she was her father. Ever since legally the house, so they live with you. And then they want to know more. No, see, they check them out. It's really like it's like a general. Yeah, and that comes out.
You can do that too, whatever you want to do, that's fine. I don't sleep. I gotta be over.
Yeah, see, that's what I want to do. And I told her, I don't want to take the baby. She said, well, I don't think that's their life together.
Yeah.
She tried to find a family situation. Yeah.
They have a sleeping bag at home. See that in your building. You might want to see it. Should be an upset.
Yeah, so that's what happened, like, Friday, she was at my house. So I had her, oh, you're sleeping, and then this and that. And what I like also is that
I suppose eventually we can
they're free, but I don't think, I mean, you can buy them on there, but you can also just download free ones. And you can get several different versions.
scratch that dog. We
So, yeah, it's nice to be able to do all the versions and have them all right there. I'm glad to help you.
Retreat started there, but then we outgrew it. Other places, so for years. Yeah. Well, I'll probably just follow the GPS. Have you been to the castle? No, that's Jet. I've only heard of it. I mean, it's outside of Richmond, but yeah. I went to look at it. Yeah, really can't. So I went on like, well, like shows Z9. Today's my first time. I don't think your mom but I'll look again. Yeah, the Titusville, I probably will. I'll probably just tell them to do the, I think I'm gonna hide it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Don't want to be the Sorry, she was. I'm trying to get it.